Hello, everybody, and welcome to Theology 101. Today, we are going to look at the book of James. The book of James is the 20th book of the New Testament. The New Testament has 5 sections: the Gospels, the Acts of the Apostles, the Pauline epistles, the general epistles, and the book of Revelation. The Gospel contained the life, ministry, teachings, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The Acts of the Apostles give a historical account of the growth and spread of the Christian church. The Pauline epistles are a collection of letters written by Paul to different churches during his time, while the general epistles are letters written by other leaders, such as Peter, John, and Jude, to different churches. Finally, the book of Revelation gives a picture of how the story of the world will end with Jesus returning to earth to reign on it and to restore it. The book of James is a part of the general epistles section of the New Testament. Now, who is James? James was the half brother of Jesus. We see this in Mark chapter 6, verse 3, when Jesus returned to his hometown and started to preach. People were amazed with his insight, and in a mocking way, they said this: "Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, and Joses, and Judas, and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. In other words, we know who this guy is. He isn't that special. He isn't a rabbi. We know his brothers and sisters. And notice who is listed first among Jesus' siblings: James, the author of this letter. So we see that James grew up with Jesus, hearing his teachings, but by this point in the gospel, he actually doesn't believe Jesus is God. In fact, he, along with Jesus' other siblings, came out and told him that he was acting crazy in Mark chapter 3, verse 21. And when his family heard it, they went out to seize him, for they were saying he is out of his mind. Later in Jesus' ministry, after Jesus started to establish his identity as the Son of God, his brothers urged him to go to Jerusalem to make a name for himself. They wanted him to get more attention, and the Apostle John adds a note on why they wanted him to do this: for not even his brothers believed in him. Wait a minute. James doesn't believe Jesus is God, even though he saw miracles, even though he heard Jesus' teachings, and even though he wants Jesus to become famous, he didn't believe Jesus was God. So when did James become a follower of his half brother? Well, we see a different James in Acts chapter 15, verses 19 through 20. By this point, he was one of the leaders of the Jerusalem church. The leaders were discussing on what to do with Gentiles who became Christians. They were debating on whether they should become circumcised according to Jewish tradition, or if they should just let them remain Gentiles. After much debate, James stands up and gives a final verdict. He says, "Therefore, my judgment is that we should not trouble those of the Gentiles who turn to God, but should write to them to abstain from the things polluted by idols, and from sexual immorality, and from what has been strangled, and from blood." So, how did James change from a skeptic to a leader of the Jerusalem church? We see what changed him in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 7. Paul talks about all the people Jesus appeared to after his resurrection. And Paul makes this note: "Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles." Jesus appeared specifically to his brother James before he appeared to his apostles. You see, Jesus had a special plan for his brother. He wanted him to be the main leader of the church in Jerusalem. But he knows that James didn't believe in him as God throughout his ministry. But when James encountered Jesus' resurrection, everything changed. So this is the author of this letter. Let's look at the content of this letter. The book of James is considered the Proverbs of the New Testament. When you survey the book, James will go through many different areas of life that don't seem very connected. But the way his letter is connected is around the idea of wisdom. We see James's thesis, or the climax of his letter, in James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18. "Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace." In his thesis, James contrasts two types of wisdom. There is an earthly wisdom and a heavenly wisdom. Earthly wisdom is information or advice you can get from anybody, anywhere. But James says that there's a second type of wisdom. And look at how he describes this type of wisdom: pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. Now, there is something interesting that James does in the Greek to describe heavenly wisdom as opposed to earthly wisdom. In the Greek, all the descriptions of earthly wisdom start with different letters to show the disorder that this wisdom creates. But look at the Greek words James uses to describe heavenly wisdom. Do you notice how all these words start with the letter E? Do you see the picture James paints? The wisdom you receive from this world will only cause disorder in your life, but the wisdom that comes from heaven, specifically from Christ, is orderly. It brings peace. And the reason why you should care about the book of James is because all of us have some disorder or conflict in our lives, don't we? For James, the answer isn't a 10-step program. The answer isn't to talk to smart people around you. The answer is to find wisdom that comes from God in heaven, because only this type of wisdom will bring wholeness in your life. Thank you to today's sponsor, On Reverence. They offer a free digital worship music app called Maskil. If you want to find out more, I'll leave some links below in the description box. If you missed the last video about the book of Hebrews, I'll leave a link here for you to watch. And until next time, see you.